UA High didn't send Class 1A and Class 1B to a training camp. They sent them to a slaughterhouse. We've been conditioned to see the forest training camp as a triumph of the spirit, a trial by fire where our favorite heroes in training finally broke their limits. But that is the propaganda. If you look at the litigation, the logistical malpractice, and the ghost of a traitor who stood by and watched his friends bleed, you realize this wasn't an accident. It was a systemic execution. Today, we are stripping away the plus ultra lie and how a single writing decision by Horikoshi 300 chapters ago changed the outcome of the entire final war. To grasp the scale of this failure, we have to look at the timeline. Just weeks prior, UA organized the Sports Festival, a global broadcast designed to show the world that the school was unshakable after the USJ attack. It was a PR masterstroke, a show of strength intended to prove that the students were safe and the heroes were in control. But in the summer of year 1, that image shattered. UA isn't just a school, it's the symbolic spine of Hero Society, a fortress guarded by the wall of public trust and the shield of all might. Yet, the administration made a decision that would raise red flags in any real-world security briefing. They moved 40 high-value targets into one place where their strength meant absolutely nothing. The security they brag about at the sports festival was already a sieve, and yet, the collective response wasn't to increase protection. It was to lean on secrecy.
他言無用で頼む。生徒たちにもだ。
In counterintelligence, secrecy is a brittle defense. It only works until the first leak. The moment All for One got that location, UA's show of strength became a death trap. They traded tactical security for environmental concealment, and they did it with the lives of children. Now look at the force to student ratio. To defend 40 students, UA sent 6 pro heroes. Against them, a handpicked kill squad designed for maximum lethality. The math here isn't just bad, it's negligent. The league didn't send grunts. They sent Dabi's incinerating flames, Toga's craziness, Twice's doubles, Magna's and Spinner's will, Moonfish's greed, Mustard's gas, and Muscular's raw unrestrained power. While Yui was busy playing hide and seek, the league was preparing for war. The school didn't build a training camp. They built a target and invited the world's dangerous people to take a shot. Why did this happen? Because UA fell for its own propaganda. They spent so much time convincing the public they were strong at the sports festival that they started believing it themselves. They thought the mere idea of All Might was enough to keep the forest safe. But as the blue flames began to spread, it became clear. UA hadn't recovered from the USJ. They had simply put a fresh coat of paint over a crumbling foundation. That wasn't plus ultra, that was hubris. Nothing exposes the cracks in the system more than the Dark Shadow Rampage. We finally saw the true terrifying scale of Tokoyami's power, but only because the top-tier education at UA failed to provide a safe environment for a student with volatile, light-sensitive quirk. While the pro heroes were occupied elsewhere, it fell on Shoji and Midoriya to play Monster Tamer. Shoji, the series' most underrated gentle giant, showed us exactly what a hero should be: calm, versatile, and focused under pressure. But let's be real. A teenager shouldn't have to talk his classmate down from a literal psychological cliff while a murderer is haunting them in the dark. Then there's the mustard gas. A middle school age villain, literally a child, held an entire section of the forest hostage with a single quirk. Where were the heroes with atmospheric quirks? Nowhere. The adults were overwhelmed, so the responsibility fell on 2 students who weren't even supposed to be in the spotlight. Tetsu and Kendo. This is where Class 1B proved they aren't just the other kids. Tetsu realized something that's actually kind of tragic. The only real difference between his class and the famous Class 1A is crisis. Class 1A isn't more talented. They've just been forced to survive more disasters. And Tetsu wasn't about to let the side character label stop him from doing what a pro should have been doing. Tetsu punching through that mask is one of the most satisfying moments in this arc. He didn't just win a fight. He was a one-man cleanup crew. He and Kendo neutralized a massive environmental poison while the pros were too busy to even notice. It's a badass moment, sure, but it's also proof that the system relies on the determination of kids to fix the gaps left by the adults. But the biggest win of the arc, the one that actually led to the rescue, wasn't a pro hero achievement. It was a student-led operation. While the police were doing their own investigation, eventually tracing the League back to that dusty bar in the city, they were completely blind to the League's real firepower. It was Yaoyorozu and Awase, working under the crushing weight of a Nomu hunt, who planted the tracker. Without those two students, the heroes might have raided the bar, but they would have been blindsided by the Nomu factory. Every major strategic victory in this arc wasn't a pro success. It was a student cleaning up an adult's mess. Now, let's talk about the ghost in the bushes. Because while the forest was burning, the most dangerous threat to UA wasn't Dabi's blue flames. It was a 15-year-old boy paralyzed by a choice that would haunt the rest of the series. Horikoshi originally planned to reveal Aoyama Yuga as the traitor right here. But by waiting, he created a narrative domino effect that fundamentally changed the world of My Hero Academia. Think about how fragile a secret location actually is. UA thought they were off the grid, hiding in a forest that didn't exist on any public map. The teachers and the pussycats were the only ones with the coordinates. The students were kept completely in the dark. So how did the message get out? It's a chilling thought. Secrecy only works if everyone inside the circle is on the same side. The moment the wheels stopped and the students stepped off that bus, the location was no longer a mystery. It was a reality. Aoyama didn't need a map or a briefing. He just needed to be there. Whether it was a quick signal during a moment of stomach distress, or a simple ping the second he had a signal, he was the bridge All For One used to cross UA's impenetrable wall. All For One didn't need to break the system. He just waited for his informant to arrive at the destination. How did the Vanguard Action Squad find a needle in a haystack? They didn't need a master spy or a high-tech breach. They just needed a kid who was too afraid to say no. Aoyama didn't just give up a location. He gave up his soul to a man who had been holding his family's lives in the balance since he was a child. He didn't need a supercomputer to ruin everything. He just needed to be a terrified puppet on an invisible leash. See, the how is actually the most chilling part. It wasn't just a random text in the woods. It was the result of a boy living a double life, a hero in training by day and a forced informant by night. All For One didn't just find the camp, he was sitting on the bus with them, watching through the eyes of a student who was drowning in guilt while his teachers were busy looking for monsters in the wrong places. By leaving Aoyama in the shadows, his guilt was allowed to rot for years. He lived in the dorms, ate with his friends, and trained with teachers, all while knowing he was the reason they were almost killed. And here is the most uncomfortable truth. The heroes only win the final war because they failed to catch the traitor in this forest. By leaving the wound to fester, they accidentally created the only weapon that could actually blindside All For One. When the truth finally came out, Class 1A didn't cast out Aoyama. They reached out back for him. They took year-old security failure and flipped the script, using Aoyama's role as an informant to feed the devil a lie. It's a haunting realization. The hero's greatest strategic victory wasn't born from perfect planning. It was built on the wreckage of a tragedy they were too late to prevent. It makes you wonder, was Aoyama the traitor, or was the Hero Society the traitor for leaving a child with no choice but to serve a monster? Stain's whole point is that these heroes are fake who only care about the big flashy battles. They miss the tragedy happening in the back of their own classroom. They didn't save Aoyama, they just waited until they could use his wreckage to win. And if that's the only way to get a victory, then maybe the system is exactly what Stain called it, terminal. Finally, we have to look at the Kota verdict.
よろしくね。
Because while we, the audience, were watching a shonen battle, Kota Izumi was watching a nightmare. Kota is perhaps the only sane person in this entire arc. To him, Hero Society isn't a dream. It's a death cult that trades parents for public safety. He's a child who has already seen the bill for heroism come due, and he wasn't interested in paying it again. When Muscular, the man who literally tore Kota's world apart, stands over him, the system fails again. There are no pro-heroes coming, no All Might, there is only Midoriya Izuku. This fight is the ultimate systemic stress test. It's a 15-year-old boy standing between a toddler and a serial killer. And when Deku realizes that 100% isn't enough to save a life, he doesn't call for a backup. He reaches into a place of pure self-destructive desperation. Let's talk about the 1,000,000%. Scientifically, it's an impossibility. Narratively, it's a scream. It's not a power-up, it's an exaggeration of emotion. Midoriya isn't just hitting a villain. He is breaking every limit of his human vessel to fulfill a promise the adults couldn't keep. We cheered because it looked cool, but look at Kota's face. Kota doesn't see a cool hero. He sees a teenager mutilating his own body, his bones snapping like glass just to fix a mistake made by the institution. In that moment, Midoriya went from a fanboy to a martyr, and Kota realized that if this is what it takes to be a true hero, then the price of admission is far too high. This fight is what finally shatters Kota's cynicism, but it replaces it with a heavy burden. He realizes that heroes do exist, but they have to break themselves to survive the world the pros created. The real question we have to ask is a society that demands its children become martyrs before they can even vote worth saving? Stain argued that the system was rotten, but here through Kota's eyes, we see it's something worse. It's parasitic. It feeds on the sacrifice of the young to maintain the comfort of the old. But the most devastating part of the forced training arc isn't just the blood that was spilled, it's the legacy it left behind. If you want to see the exact moment the symbol of peace began to crumble, look at the goodbye. The kidnapping of Bakugo was the ultimate checkmate. By taking the student who represented UA's raw, explosive potential, the League forced the heroes out of the shadows and into a corner. The forest was the match, but the explosion was yet to come. Because of the negligence we've discussed today, the pro heroes were back into an all-or-nothing mission. They weren't just raiding a hideout. They were walking into a desperate, high-stake collision that would lead us directly to the streets of Kamino Ward. The forest proved that UA couldn't protect its children. Kamino was about to prove that the world could no longer protect its god. Was Stain right, or did the heroes find a way to redeem a system built on the broken bones of students? In the next video, we're going to break down the Kamino raid, the night the symbol of peace died, and the night the world realized that once the fire starts, you can't just wish it away. If you think Forest Training Camp arc was a failure of leadership, or if you think Deku's sacrifice was the only thing that saved the series, let me know in the comments. We're diving deep into the Kamino incident in the next part of this series. So hit subscribe and turn on the bell. Thanks for watching and see you in Camino.